Chapter 1055. When Wyrm was weakened from his slumber, he accidentally wandered into a certain world. As for the reason, it was naturally the origin black soil. The origin black soil was the dust of a dead world, while the origin black soil was in slumber. When the origin reincarnated, its origin power would naturally fall into slumber as well. During this period, there would definitely be worlds that were unable to save themselves and were destroyed, which was why most worlds perished. Since the origin had a lifespan, worlds naturally had a lifespan as well. The origin could reincarnate, but worlds couldn't, and worlds would eventually reach their end, which was why a small number of worlds perished. These dead worlds would then turn into dust and return to the origin. The dust produced by these worlds that had reached the end of their lifespan and died naturally wouldn't affect the origin at all, and could even replenish the origin's energy, just like how fallen leaves return to their roots. As for the destroyed worlds, they were much more troublesome. The origin was like a mother who unconditionally spoiled her child, fully accepting and taking care of the dust of these worlds. Firstly, the origin felt guilty for not being able to save its child as a mother. After the dust entered the origin, it would fuse with the origin power, and the resulting product would be the origin black soil. Secondly, the origin wanted to use the origin black soil to recreate new worlds, which could also be considered as compensation for the destroyed worlds. As for why the origin black soil was able to counter Wyrm, it was because the origin black soil contained negative origin power, which was also why Wyrm was able to counter the origin black soil. The negative emotions of a dead world were left behind in the dust, which fused with the origin power, and naturally became negative origin power. The reason why Wyrm was able to escape from the origin and wander into a certain world was also due to the increase of the origin black soil. As more and more origin black soil was absorbed, the origin couldn't contain it anymore. Worlds weren't something that could be created at will, and even the origin needed time to recreate the origin black soil into a new world. Furthermore, the worlds between worlds were so vast that there was no end to them. The number of worlds that existed between worlds was probably more than 1 trillion. And as the root of origin and the root of origin slept and reincarnated, countless worlds that were heading towards destruction would turn into dust and passively be drawn into the root of origin, fusing with the root of origin and becoming origin black mud. Whether it was a few cycles or a dozen, the black origin soil was indeed being consumed and reforged into one world after another. However, as the great origin cycles became frequent, more and more black origin soil accumulated in the great origin, eventually causing the great origin to overload itself. Wyrm and most of the black origin soil hence flowed out, leaving only a little bit of black origin soil in the great origin, the black origin soil that Wyrm had seen when he first entered the great origin. The reason for the frequent reincarnation cycles of the great origin was actually very simple. It was caused by too much dust from the death of a world. The great origin would produce root of origin power to fuse with the dust, but as the world died faster, the great origin would have to produce root of origin power faster. This would put a burden on the great origin, causing the great origin's reincarnation cycle to accelerate, causing Wyrm and the black origin soil to flow out. It was like a sealed water bag that was filled to the brim, and if more water was poured in, the bag would explode and all the water would flow out. This was how the black origin soil flowed between worlds, and some even accidentally entered them. It was also because of this that Wyrm entered a certain world, and was adopted as a normal infant. Although Wyrm now knew everything, this was still a difficult problem that had no solution. The only solution was to start with the creatures that lived in each world. The creatures that lived in each world would develop, be it through technology or magic, but once they reached a certain level of development, these creatures would seek to reach even higher heights, which was why they had already faced the threat of destruction. In other words, they would destroy themselves as well as the world they lived in, which was the cause of the destruction of most worlds. For example, Mayo's world was destroyed because of the Ainsworth family. However, because the M-shaped moon world had evolved into a parallel world, it indirectly resolved the threat of destruction. Even if Mayo's world was destroyed, the M-shaped moon world would still be fine. But in the end, Mayo's world was still saved by Wyrm. Most worlds didn't evolve into parallel worlds, which meant that if the intelligent creatures that lived in those worlds caused a world crisis like the Ainsworth family did, the only outcome for that world would be destruction. However, it was extremely difficult to start from this aspect. Once an intelligent creature reached a certain level of development, it was unavoidable for them to explore even higher heights. This was a necessity for any creature that lived in this world. But the key was whether or not these intelligent creatures could adapt to the next height and control it. If they could adapt and control it well, the world would continue to operate as usual, and the intelligent creatures would continue to live. But if they couldn't adapt and control it well, the world would very likely be destroyed. So, how could one change the creatures of a world and make them give up on exploring higher heights when they weren't confident enough? Wyrm could only think of one way, which was to become the god of that world. However, there were so many worlds, and Wyrm naturally couldn't do them one by one. Wyrm was testing the backup machine in preparation for this plan. This was the plan that Wyrm and Collis had discussed before leaving the route. However, this was still a big plan, and the route wasn't omnipotent. The details of the plan still needed Wyrm to prepare, and only then could they rely on the route to complete the plan. Let's go pick up Mayu first. Wyrm shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Wyrm jumped out of the window, walked to the door, opened the door and got in. Your sunglasses. Collis spoke like an intelligent voice, and a pair of sunglasses popped out from the steering wheel. Wyrm grabbed it and put it on his eyes. After all, it was a convertible. Wyrm had requested that Collis provide sunglasses when driving such a car. Then let's go. However, before the car started, the door to the front passenger seat opened, and a beautiful lady got in. It wasn't winter, but she was still wearing a white fox fur coat, and it was the kind that covered her whole body tightly. The lady flipped her pink waist-length hair and smiled at Wyrm. Although the lady was wrapped up tightly, it was as if she wasn't wearing anything. Her charm was completely reflected on her face. Maeve, why are you here? Wyrm was shocked and quickly looked around to see if there were any passers-by. That's right, it was Maeve. Chapter 1056. Why was Maeve here? Of course, it was because Wyrm had discussed with the suppression force and asked the suppression force to bring the Maeve Wyrm knew from the moment before her death to this era. This way, it would not destroy history, and it would allow Wyrm to see the original her. Although it would be better to directly ask the suppression force to take over history, Wyrm felt that it was unfair to Maeve. That history, that story, were all created by Maeve herself, and Wyrm had no right to take it away. In short, Maeve came to the modern era, and it was the modern era of Ilya's parallel world, and settled down and survived. And Maeve's wish, in fact, as long as Wyrm was here, Maeve had nothing to be dissatisfied with. Perhaps the only thing that Maeve was dissatisfied with was that Wyrm could not be with her all the time. Maeve rested her body, tilted her head, leaned forward, and lay directly on Wyrm's shoulder. The familiar body fragrance entered Wyrm's nose. Of course I'm here to look for my dear. As soon as Maeve spoke, the surrounding air was filled with charm. Don't worry, I've already set up a spell to disperse idlers around. No one will come. After all, Maeve was also a druid. Maeve's charm could be called forced hypnosis for ordinary men. Even if Maeve was wrapped up so tightly, once a passerby passed by, it would be easy to attract them. Wyrm, who had experienced such an incident once, did not want to experience it again. Wyrm breathed a sigh of relief, then looked directly into Maeve's eyes. Didn't I tell you to stay at home obediently? You didn't listen to me again. Although it was a reproach, it was more or less flirting. However, immediately after, Maeve showed a hint of jealousy. You still know that we have a family, then why do you always come to look for your little sister? Could it be that you like her? At that moment, Wyrm directly gave Maeve a knock on the head. Mayu is just my little sister. As her only relative in this world, I have to take care of her, don't I? There was nothing wrong with this. After all, Shiro in Mayo's world was still in Mayo's world. In Ilya's world, Mayu indeed only had Wyrm as a relative. Wyrm felt a little helpless as he reached out to rub Maeve's tearful little head. Besides, I've already explained Mayo's situation to you. Leah and Jihan can understand, and even Master Skaha agrees with my actions. Besides, how old is Mayu? Why are you jealous? Artoria and Joan of Arc were also brought to the modern world by Wyrm through the same method. After the Battle of Cameron, Artoria was brought to this world on the ship to the Land of Ideals, while Joan of Arc was brought to this world a second before she was burned to death. Whether it was Maeve, Artoria, or Joan of Arc's injuries at that time, they were all healed instantly by the power of suppression, which could be considered as doing Wyrm a favor. After Artoria and Joan of Arc came to this era, they were very well behaved and didn't ask anything. Because of Wyrm, Artoria wasn't so obsessed with the country. As for Joan of Arc, she was just taking advantage of the situation to save the country. The current France was no longer the France of hundreds of years ago. Without obsession, the two of them listened to Wyrm and lived in Winterwood City peacefully. As for Skaha, Wyrm personally went to the country of shadows to invite her out, and even fought her because of it. However, Skaha wasn't surprised that Wyrm could find her, nor was she surprised that Wyrm would come to her. After all, Skaha was the first person to know about Wyrm's identity as the source of power. The fight also dispelled Skaha's thoughts of suicide. The reason why a person would seek death wasn't because she couldn't die, but because she couldn't find the meaning to continue living on this basis. That was why she sought death. Wyrm found meaning for Skaha, so she didn't want to die anymore. When he first met Wyrm, Skaha had pinned all his hopes on him. As for the people he taught later, like Cuchulainn and the others, they were just for fun while Skaha was waiting for Wyrm. Skaha hoped that one day Wyrm could kill her, so she had high hopes for Wyrm. She taught Wyrm everything she knew and even threw herself at him emotionally. Not only did Wyrm treat Skaha as his older sister, but Skaha also treated Wyrm as her younger brother. As for why they weren't mother and son, well, after all, their ages didn't match. Speaking of mother, Wyrm thought of Tiamat. Tiamat also came to this era. However, because he still couldn't let go, Wyrm arranged for Enkidu and Tiamat to live on the other side of Winterwood City, one city away from Artoria, Jean and Maeve. That's right, he didn't want them to see each other. In fact, Wyrm didn't want Mayu, Ilya, and Tiamat to see each other for the time being. The main reason was that Wyrm wasn't used to having Tiamat as his mother. Wyrm couldn't imagine what it would be like if Tiamat called him a child, in front of everyone. But it would be terrible. Wyrm couldn't help but shudder, and the hand that was massaging Maeve's head became heavier. Maeve's expression became more comfortable after being massaged by Wyrm, but Wyrm's action made Maeve break out of her comfort. Looking at Wyrm's unnatural face, Maeve was a little worried. What's wrong? Nothing. Wyrm must be hiding something from Maeve. No matter how stupid Maeve was, she could see it. However, she still chose to respect this man, and she led the conversation back to the previous topic. Although we have a family, if you don't accompany me, I'll be unhappy. Artoria, Jean, and Maeve lived together in a big house in the suburbs. However, because the house was very big and there were many rooms, Maeve could only barely share a room with Artoria and Jean. It couldn't be helped. Maeve's temperament was slightly disliked by the two. On the contrary, Artoria and Jean were very happy to talk to each other, and they even called each other sisters. Although the two of them did look very similar, only their faces were similar. At least, the difference in their breasts was sometimes very big. However, Maeve had changed a lot during this period in Winterwood City. She wrapped herself up tightly when she went out, but at home, Maeve was still slutty. According to Maeve, in order to change a little in front of Wyrm, and at the same time, it was also a foundation to build a good relationship with Artoria and Jean. And Artoria and Jean also saw that Maeve had indeed changed, so the relationship between the three of them had eased during this period of time. However, Wyrm basically didn't see her. As Maeve said, Wyrm basically lived in Mayu's house. After all, it was to take care of Mayu. It was understandable that Maeve sneaked out to Wyrm. Knowing Maeve's temperament, Wyrm didn't want to reason with Maeve. Anyway, he was not in the right, so he just let Maeve do whatever she wanted. It is indeed my fault. Then how do you want me to make it up to you? I will definitely do it. Wyrm's hand touched Maeve's head again. Really? Maeve gently grabbed Wyrm's hand and put it on her face. Her expression was quite charming. Of course it's true. Wyrm replied righteously. Then I want to do it 10 times tonight. Maeve's expression became more and more charming. Wyrm even felt a little bit. Turning his head, Wuming's cheeks were a little bit red. Are you serious? The number of times the two talked about was naturally the number of times they should do it at night. On the night Maeve came to this era, because she experienced the intertwining of life and death, plus meeting Wuming, Maeve, who couldn't bear the loneliness, successfully took the first spot of Wuming. In a sense, Wuming had matured. And coincidentally, that day was also the day Wuming crossed the inexplicable threshold inside the root, and became an adult root dragon. By the way, Maeve was the same as Wuming. That was also the reason why Artoria and Jean started to accept Maeve. No matter how promiscuous a woman was, if she kept her purity for the man she loved, Artoria and Jean couldn't say anything. By the way, because Maeve took the first spot of Wuming, Artoria and Jean finally decided to attack Wuming at night on the second and third night respectively. Although Wuming was a little regretful that he didn't have three, for Wuming and Maeve, who already had sex, Maeve's request was nothing to Wuming. Okay then. Wuming agreed. After all, 10 times didn't sound like much. And Maeve also smiled. Wuming, who didn't have much experience, didn't know what 10 times was. But he would know tonight. Master, at this time, Master Mayu should be out of school. Oh no, I'm late. Forget it, Collis, I'll go first. Wait for me here. Wuming urged Collis anxiously, and then opened the golden ripple outside the car door. You two, be good and don't run around. After Wuming said that, he jumped out of the car in a panic and directly jumped into the portal. Maeve, on the other hand, rested her chin on her hands and looked at the place where Wuming left with a happy smile. What, as expected, my sister is the most important. Although Maeve's tone was full of blame, her happiness overflowed. And Maeve's smile was still charming, but it was also full of happiness. Chapter 1057. At the entrance of the private Suigunhara Academy's primary school. At this moment, it had been some time since school ended. Other than the primary school students who stayed behind to participate in club activities, there was almost no one at the school entrance. As for why it was because there were still a few primary school students pacing back and forth at the entrance of the primary school. That. Mayu-chan, is your brother not here yet? Gue Mimi, who had a gentle personality, looked around cautiously as if she was looking for someone. Beside Gue Mimi, Mayu carried her little backpack obediently and waited as if she wasn't in a hurry at all. She was quite calm. It's fine. Actually, you don't have to wait with me. Although Mayu's tone was still cold, compared to how Mayu treated Gue Mimi and the others in the beginning, it was a huge improvement. What are you saying? How can we leave you here alone to wait? Yujianza Ryuko beside Gue Mimi shouted as if he was willing to die for Mayu. Alright, I know that Ryuko cares about Mayu-chan. Stop shouting. Ryuko is very conspicuous like this. Who knows when he will be targeted by human traffickers and be kidnapped? Moriyama Nanakuru beside Yujianza Ryuko narrowed her eyes and smiled as she spoke to Yujianza Ryuko. Human traffickers. I'm not afraid. Although that was what he said, Ryuko's legs were already trembling. Standing beside Ilya, Kurihara Tarika, who was silently complaining in her heart, sighed helplessly. By the way, with Mayu and Ilya's relationship, can't you let Mayu stay at Ilya's place for a while? Kurihara Tarika suggested. This. Ilya, who was beside Mayu, didn't know what to do. After all, she couldn't say that she actually wanted to be picked up by Wuming like Mayu. Brother Wuming said that he would come back to pick me up every day. I believe in Brother Wuming. Mayu's words helped Ilya out of her predicament. But if Mayu-chan's brother is really delayed by something, will Mayu-chan really have to wait here forever? Gue Mimi was right. Waiting like this was not a solution. Why don't we go to the arcade and play for a while? Play my ass. Kurihara Keihua clenched her fist and pretended to hit Yujianza Ryuko. Yujianza Ryuko quickly hid behind Gue Mimi. Gue Mimi was at a loss, while Moriyama Nanao Tortoise was watching with a smile. This was the daily life of the four little ones, and Ilya did not find it strange. However, Ilya turned to look at Mayu, who was silently waiting for her. Did Big Brother really run into some trouble today? Could it be Ruby's doing? Ilya recalled that Ruby seemed to be following Wuming and couldn't help but worry. I'll have to ask Ruby later. Ilya thought so. Just as the four little ones were fooling around and Ilya's thoughts were flying, Mayu saw something, and her eyes lit up. Then she moved. Mayu. Ilya was the first to notice Mayu's movement. And then the four little ones also noticed it. Looking in the direction Mayu ran, Wuming saw the person who moved Mayu. It's Big Brother. It's Mayu's brother. That's right, it was Wuming who lost track of time while chatting with my Fu. Wuming hugged Mayu, who threw herself into his arms. Sorry Mayu, I was delayed by something. Although Wuming's words were somewhat insincere, Mayu didn't care. As long as Wuming could come, she was already very happy. It's okay, brother Wuming. Then, Mayu left Wuming's arms and stood beside Wuming. Big brother, did anything happen? Ilya also walked over and asked cautiously. Ilya always felt that Ruby would do something. Even if she didn't do it now, she would do it in the future. Ilya expressed that she didn't believe in Ruby's character. It's okay, I just met an acquaintance and chatted for a while. Wuming shook his head, indicating that it was okay. Mayu, Ilya, and the others didn't know about my Fu and the others, so Wuming could only explain it this way. So Mayu's brother made us wait with Mayu for so long because he likes the new and hates the old. Yu Jinza, who was the most lively, jumped out first. Don't be like this, Ryuko, it's very rude. Gue Mimi pulled Yu Jinza's sleeve, looking a little embarrassed. Ryuko has indeed said too much. Kurihara Takika pushed her glasses, then looked at Moriyama Nanao. Moriyama Nanao, who understood, continued to smile with squinted eyes. But Mayu, Chan's brother did forget about Mayu because he was chatting with others, so we waited with Mayu for a long time. Wu Ming smiled helplessly as he watched the four little ones singing one another's tune. In that case, I'll compensate you. Immediately, the four children's eyes lit up. Children were naturally interested in compensation, rewards, and other things. Only Ilya waved her hand awkwardly. Big brother, actually there's no need. Ugh. Ilya, who was speaking halfway, was glared at by Kurihara Takika and Moriyama Nanao, and immediately shut her mouth in fear. Mayu's brother is so rich, why don't he treat us to an arcade? As expected of Yu Jinza Ryuko's choice, she couldn't forget about the arcade. Mayu's brother has been picking up Mayu in a different luxury car every day. Kurihara Takika saw it clearly. Wuming, who had returned from a business trip abroad, Mayu told the four children, drove different cars to pick up Mayu. Kurihara Takika, who was considered mature among the four children, couldn't recognize all of them, but she could tell that they weren't ordinary cars. The four children and Ilya also took a few rides, and Kurihara Takika could feel that these cars were very luxurious. However, it was very likely that Wuming rented them. After all, who would buy so many cars for no reason? In other words, Mayu, Chan's brother is treating us to an amusement park, so what? Moriyama Nanao successfully cooperated with Kurihara Takika. As a qualified elementary school student, the two of them wanted to see how Wuming would respond. Would he force himself to treat them to an amusement park, or would he find an excuse to avoid it? This was a big test for Mayu-chan. Amusement park? Gue Mimi was shocked. This isn't good. Gue Mimi, who didn't have the same thoughts as Kurihara Takika and Moriyama Nanao, was worried that this request was too rude. Yes, actually, we just need to go to an arcade. Yu Jinza Ryuko, who wasn't as smart as Gue Mimi, was also worried. They were just classmates with Mayu, and they weren't related. How could they ask her brother to take them to an amusement park after accompanying Mayu for a while? Ilya-chan, say something. Gue Mimi looked at Ilya for help. This. Ilya, who knew Wuming's background, didn't know what to say. Wuming definitely didn't lack money. Although she also wanted to go to the amusement park, he was Mayu's brother, not her brother. Then let's go. Mayu made the final decision. Mayu's words stunned the four little ones. Since Mayu has said so, then today, I will take you to the amusement park to play. I hope it's not too late. After all, this is related to how long you can play in the amusement park. Wuming also made up his mind. Moreover, Wuming's expression didn't have the slightest hint of pain or anything to hide. It was as if he was deciding on something as normal as eating and drinking. Hey hey hey. The four little ones were stunned. Gue, Mimi, and Eugenza Ryuko didn't expect Mayo's brother to actually agree to such a rude request. What surprised Kurihara Tarika and Moriyama Nanakuru was that Wuming didn't have any problems agreeing to it. Could it be that Mayo's brother was actually really rich? Pa! Wuming snapped his fingers, and two luxury cars instantly appeared at the intersection. With a turn, they arrived in front of everyone. This scene caused a commotion in the surroundings. After all, this was the entrance of an elementary school, and next to it was the entrance of a middle school. Moreover, the location of the private Suihara Academy wasn't remote, and there were many passers-by. In the next second, two drivers wearing black suits and sunglasses got down from the car. They looked like bodyguards. They elegantly and luxuriously opened the doors of the luxury cars. They bowed and extended their hands, inviting everyone to get in. The four little ones were stunned. Even Ilya, who had never seen such a scene before, was stunned on the spot. Let's go, everyone. Wuming elegantly bowed to the four little ones, dragging them back to reality from their stupor. Oh! However, the exclamations of the elementary school students instantly resounded throughout the entire private Suihara Academy. Chapter 1058. After the four little ones spoke to their families on the phone, they got into the car behind. As for Ilya, Wuming personally called Scylla. Then, she got into the car in front with Mayu and Wuming, and went to the amusement park. Because they had indeed wasted a lot of time, and the elementary school students still had to go to school tomorrow, they did not play at the amusement park for long. Near the end of the night, Wuming got a limousine out of nowhere and drove it back to the four little ones and Ilya, who still wanted to have more fun. When they finally sent Ilya home, Scylla chatted with Wuming for a while. Scylla even wanted to ask Wuming to stay for dinner, but in the end, she was rejected by Wuming. After bidding farewell to the reluctant Ilya, Wuming drove the ordinary car that had become normal at some point and drove back to the Shoyue residence with Mayu. The two cars and the bodyguard-like driver from before were all caused by Wuming using the rights he had obtained during his time in Winterwood City. Wuming had a lot of rights in Winterwood City in Mayo's world, but in Winterwood City in Ilya's world, Wuming still had rights. However, these rights had just been obtained not long ago. He got Collis to transfer the dead and black accounts of all the banks in the world to his account through the internet. Through spending money, he set up a company, recruited employees, and provided technology. It was all done by Collis. After that, he went to visit the underworld leaders of Winterwood City. If he could use magic to hypnotize them, he would directly use magic to hypnotize them. Under special circumstances, he would directly place restrictions on those who could not be hypnotized. Wuming did not want these underworld leaders to secretly find people to deal with Wuming in the future. Although he was not afraid, it was indeed troublesome and would affect his mood. So Wuming wanted to end it once and for all. After that, Wuming also suggested to invest heavily in them. The effect of the stick and the carrot was basically very effective. Although these underworld leaders were unwilling, they would not go against money. After all, they also lived in this legal society. As long as they had enough money, they would be happy to let Wuming be the boss, and a boss who basically delegated power. Not to mention, Wuming's strength was also a big thigh for them, so why not do it? On the surface, Wuming was the boss of a big company, but in private he had become the real ruler of Winterwood City. Although he basically did not care about Winterwood City's affairs, luxury cars, bodyguards, and drivers were basically a piece of cake. Before Wuming came to pick up Mayu, he used the portal to see if Mayu was still waiting at the entrance of the elementary school. When he saw the four elementary school students accompanying Mayu and waiting with Mayu, Wuming came up with the idea of inviting this group of elementary school students to play at the amusement park as a way of thanking them for accompanying Mayu. Therefore, all of this was planned by Wuming long ago. The two cars were also ordered by Wuming in advance. As for the car that sent the elementary school students home, it was transformed by Collis. After sending off the four little ones, in order to not be so eye-catching and exaggerated, Collis became ordinary again on the road. Anyway, Ilya and Mayu knew about Collis' existence, so there was no need to hide it from them. Mayu, are you happy today? Wuming chatted with Mayu, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. Yes, I'm very happy. Meiyu had a heartfelt smile on her face. Ever since Wuming solved the problem of the black mud, he had been accompanying Meiyu during this period of time. He personally sent her to and from school, and the meals she ate were also personally prepared by Wuming. At night, if she was not being coaxed to sleep by Wuming, she would fall asleep with him. It was not the first time he brought Meiyu to various places to play. There were even times when Meiyu and Wuming went out alone without Ilya's knowledge. In short, she felt that she was about to be spoiled by Wuming. However, Meiyu felt that she was quite happy. Glancing at Meiyu's smiling face, Wuming tried to speak. Meiyu, if someone else wants to participate in our lives, what would you think? Wuming's words were rather vague, and she did not know what he was referring to. However, as a perfect Superman comparable to a PhD student, Meiyu seemed to have realized something, and the smile on her face gradually disappeared. Wuming, who saw this scene, realized that something was wrong. He immediately changed his tone, and changed the topic. After all, we have always been two people. The Shoyu mansion is so big, it's not bad to raise some animals, right? Fortunately, the topic just now was very vague, and Meiyu did not immediately see anything. Otherwise, it would be hard to say. Animals. Meiyu could not help but be stunned. That's right. After all, I can't always be with you. Raising some animals in our house can also help you relieve your boredom. Although the problem of the black mud was solved, it did not mean that Wuming was free. Wuming's time with Meiyu was actually compensation for leaving Meiyu. Wuming still had a lot of things to deal with. It was also time for Nazalik to go back and deal with the situation of the big tomb. Although Wuming could move the big tomb now, it would not be easy for all the members of the big tomb to live honestly in Winterwood City. Wuming could not force the members of the big tomb, whose justice points were at least -500, to do good deeds. The only one with high justice points was the old butler, Seabass. Therefore, he had to arrange a place for them to live. There was also Irbiruai. How did she know Wuming's name? Even if she had seen the previous Wuming, he was not known by this name before. In fact, he did not even have a name before, only the name of the Dragon of Origin, which was both a race and a personal name. Wuming had to figure out what was going on. There was also the nameless spellbook that the dragon gave to Wuming. Wuming had to figure out the relationship between the dragon and himself. He also had to take care of the community in the box court world. After all, Wuming was also a member. Whether it was as a member of no name, or for the sake of Black Rabbit, Run, Letitia, and the others, Wuming had to help the community grow. Moreover, he could not use his own power to forcibly improve the community. That would not only spoil the growth by excessive enthusiasm, but it would also be quite disrespectful to the community. Therefore, Wuming had to act like Sun Wukong needed to protect Tang Sanzang. This process was not easy. Moreover, Wuming had to deal with the conspiracy of the upper echelons of the box court. There was also Pest. Wuming had promised to help her, so he had to do it personally. But for better or for worse, No Name did not have to be taken over. No Name only had its meaning in the box court world. Also, Wuming had to return to the Godslayer world. Athena, Guinevere, and Lancelot had become the subordinate gods of Wuming, the last king. Wuming could not just ignore them. If nothing unexpected happened, he would definitely take over. After all, because of Wuming's identity as a Godslayer, he could not stay in the Godslayer world for too long. Wuming had a headache just thinking about that. How would the young female version of Guinevere in the Godslayer world meet the young female version of Guinevere in the Model Moon world? That was why Wuming did not choose to bring Guinevere and Artoria to the modern world, and only brought Artoria back. It was really difficult. There was also the world of the Star Cup. He had to go back and see what the god of games, Teto, had changed that world into. He was also very concerned about how Rick and Shobi were doing. Most importantly, there was the problem of the root. A single cycle of reincarnation of the root was a very long time for long-lived species. But that did not mean that Wuming did not have to do anything about it. To prevent the black root soil from overloading the root and causing it to leak again, Wuming had to solve this problem no matter what. And the only solution now was to let Wuming, the god, exist in the many worlds and let Wuming, the god, restrict them. And Wuming had been preparing all along. Chapter 1059. Putting that aside for now, Wuming needed to pay attention to Meiyu. Although Wuming changed the topic, this wasn't something that Wuming thought of casually. He also had the same thought. However, Meiyu's answer was out of Wuming's expectations. Brother Wuming, I'm actually not lonely. Angelica has been accompanying me while you weren't around. Wuming was taken aback. His foot that was stepping on the accelerator paused, but he immediately recovered. That's right. There's still Angelica. As Angelica was defeated by Wuming and picked up, she stayed in the Shuoyue residence. Julian also agreed to it. Wuming even made Angelica a maid. During the time that Wuming was away, Mei was taken care of by Angelica. Although Angelica was ice cold, it had to be said that once Angelica carried out orders, she was perfect. As a maid, Angelica would clean the Shuoyue residence 3 times a day and tidy it up neatly. At night, she would also read extracurricular books for Meiyu. During the day, she would prepare 3 meals and bento. Although they weren't top-notch, the taste was still rather delicious. Every time, Elia and the others would exchange meals with Meiyu, so that they could have a taste of Meiyu's delicious bento. In addition to Wuming's performance today, perhaps the 4 primary school students had already treated Meiyu as a rich missy with a maid, a big family, and a huge business. In short, Angelica could be considered to be responsible for this family. Meiyu's impression of this former enemy had changed a lot. As for the reason why Wuming forgot about Angelica, it was because ever since Wuming returned, Angelica basically didn't have a sense of presence. Meiyu's 3 meals and bento were personally prepared by Wuming. When Meiyu slept, Wuming would either accompany her to sleep or read her stories. During the day, Wuming would bring Meiyu out to play when he was free. As for the cleanliness of the Shuoyue residence, in fact, the Shuoyue residence always had an automatic cleaning magic in operation. After all, this was Wuming's magic workshop and there was no need for someone to clean it 3 times a day. As for Angelica, because she had nothing to do, she basically sat in her room and stared blankly. She would also wait for Wuming and Meiyu to finish their meals before cooking. When Meiyu was at home, she would accompany Meiyu. When Meiyu wasn't at home, Wuming would go out. Gradually, Wuming and Angelica met less and less. Until now, Wuming had really forgotten about her. If it wasn't for Meiyu's reminder, Wuming didn't know how long it would take for him to realize this problem. Alright, now there was another problem of dealing with Angelica. Although Angelica has always been cold, I'm not lonely, so I don't need any small animals. Then Meiyu's tone changed. Or are you saying that, Brother Wuming, you're going to leave me again? Definitely not. Wuming refuted without thinking. This time it really wasn't. The matter of the root black soil had been dealt with. Wuming didn't have anything particularly important to do. Even if he had to deal with the people and things that Wuming encountered in other worlds, he wouldn't be as anxious as dealing with Gidia. Moreover, Wuming could change the flow of time in this world through the root black soil. He could completely deal with everything in other worlds, but only a few seconds had passed in this world. However, Wuming didn't need to do that. After all, he just said that he wasn't in a hurry to deal with things in other worlds, so he could take it slowly. As long as it's not, Meiyu mumbled softly. Wuming stopped the car and rubbed Meiyu's little head. Don't worry, Big Brother will accompany you. I won't leave you again. I believe in Brother Wuming. The 2 siblings chatted in the car for a while before getting out. Wuming stopped not to rub Meiyu's head, but because they had arrived at the entrance of the Shuoyue residence. After getting out of the car, Kalas transformed back into a ball with wings and followed behind Wuming. Master, young lady, you're back. A cold voice came from the door. Angelica? Why are you out? Wuming ignored the way Angelica addressed him and Meiyu. Angelica would usually be in a daze in her room at this time. After all, it wasn't time to clean up, and there was still some time before cooking. Today is the fixed day to purchase ingredients. Angelica was like a qualified maid as she answered Wuming respectfully. Brother Wuming, our family's ingredients and daily necessities are all purchased by Angelica at a fixed time. Today is indeed the day. While Meiyu and Wuming were chatting, Angelica had already walked past them and arrived at the roadside. At this time, a few refrigerated cars arrived at the entrance of the Shoyu residence. As usual, put down the goods and you can leave. I've already transferred the money to your account. Angelica was as dignified as a boss. Her last sentence was obviously directed at the driver who got off the first car, who was obviously not the driver. The drivers who got out of the cars, including the driver from the first car, all bowed to Angelica. Thank you, big sister. It wasn't the first time they quickly unloaded the goods. After that, the drivers got into the car and left without stopping. What's going on? Wuming looked at Mayu in confusion. I gave the money that brother Wuming you left at the Shoyu residence to Angelica. Angelica used her brain to earn more money, and she even built a good relationship with the sellers. According to Mayu, Angelica had built a good relationship with the sellers in terms of food, clothing, and daily necessities. Every time she needed something, the sellers would deliver it to her door, and Angelica would even give them a tip. Therefore, Angelica was a customer that couldn't be offended. Wuming, who knew this, couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Wuming had a feeling that Angelica didn't just build a good relationship with the sellers with money. She might have even beaten them up. One must know that the company represented by the logo on the refrigerated car that delivered the goods just now, although it was an ordinary company in Winterwood City, it wasn't ordinary at all. The boss of the company had some magic background, and Wuming's magic hint was resisted by him. However, it seemed like he used some kind of tool, but it still showed that he wasn't an ordinary person, although he was still forcibly restrained in the end. The driver who got out of the first car was actually the boss of the company. Wuming felt that the guy would definitely make a move on a fat sheep like Angelica. Only after being beaten up and understanding the difference between the two would they say something like, "Big sister." However, this had nothing to do with him. If Angelica was willing, then she could be the big sister. Anyway, the man wasn't a good person, so it didn't matter if she stood on top of him. Wuming's mouth twitched when he saw Angelica directly use displacement magic to transfer the ingredients away. These goods were all packed in boxes, but there was a lot of them. If it wasn't for the Shoyu residence's geographical location near the edge of the city, this would definitely cause a commotion. Angelica and Mayu were the same kind of people in some ways. They were people who didn't care about common sense or didn't know much about it. Angelica, come find me later. I have something to talk to you about. Wuming started to deal with Angelica's problem. Chapter 1060. Under Mayu's curious gaze, Wuming and Angelica entered a certain room, and came out after about half an hour. However, they weren't doing anything indescribable. Wuming simply wanted to have a chat with Angelica about whether she should continue staying here. Firstly, Julian had a lot of things to do back then. Angelica was staying in the Shoyu residence, so it was easier for Julian to have one less person. Secondly, Angelica thought that she had been abandoned and was picked up by Wuming, who didn't kill her. Thereafter, she acknowledged Wuming as her master. Thirdly, even though Wuming didn't realize this problem due to Mayu's excessive independence, Angelica had indeed taken on the role of Wuming's nanny when Mayu wasn't around. These were the three reasons why Wuming wanted Angelica to stay. But now that Wuming was back and Julian was almost done with his preparations, Angelica could return. Wuming knew that Julian still had feelings for his elder sister. Wuming wouldn't forcefully separate the siblings. Perhaps after Angelica returned, Julian could instill feelings and memories into her, allowing the emotionless Angelica to truly revive as Julian's elder sister. Although reviving the dead was a taboo in any world, and it wasn't a true revival, Wuming didn't mind. However, it was still up to Julian and Angelica to decide on their own. Even though Angelica lacked emotions, she wasn't a complete puppet. In the end, Angelica made a decision. I want to go back and take a look. Wuming and Mayu bid farewell to Angelica, who returned to Mayu's world. Mayu, go do your homework. I'll prepare dinner for you. Okay. Mayu nodded lightly and walked into her room. Wuming also walked to the kitchen and began his simple but realistic dinner life. Then Wuming saw Maeve, who was wrapped in a towel, walking out of the bathroom. Maeve. Wuming hurriedly lowered his voice, afraid that Mayu would hear him. Wu Ming didn't want to see the scene of Meiyu pointing at Mai Fu with a face full of resentment and asking Wu Ming who this woman is. But my dear, you didn't let me go, Maeve smiled charmingly. Since she didn't let her go, Maeve volunteered to stay. As for why Angelica didn't stop Maeve, it was because Angelica knew about the relationship between Wu Ming and Maeve. Angelica even knew about the existence of Artoria, Joan of Arc, Skaha, and Tiamat. It couldn't be helped. Because of ignoring Angelica, Wu Ming basically didn't hide anything from Angelica. And because of her lack of emotions, Angelica didn't deliberately avoid Wu Ming, because her thoughts were different from ordinary people. Therefore, Angelica could be said to be the person who understood Wu Ming the most right now. My queen, please don't play with me. Wu Ming hurriedly opened the portal and signaled Maeve to leave quickly. Give me double tonight and I'll leave, Maeve said arrogantly. Okay. I'll promise you anything. Wu Ming pushed Maeve into the portal. Then Wu Ming let out a long sigh. It seems that the first thing that needs to be dealt with is the issue of Meiyu and Maeve meeting. After all, it's not a solution to keep hiding it. Brother Wu Ming, did I just hear a woman's voice? Meiyu suddenly walked out from the corner. It's nothing. I was just talking to Collis, who is practicing voice changing on what ingredients to use tonight. In an instant, Collis, who was beside Wu Ming, became the scapegoat. Yes. What else could Collis say? She could only help Wu Ming cover it up. Just do as usual, Meiyu said softly, and didn't want to disturb Wu Ming anymore and returned to her room. Wu Ming let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, Shoyu's house was big enough. Otherwise, it would be really troublesome. However, what Wu Ming didn't know was what kind of disaster he was going to face tonight. It was the next morning in the timeline. In the mansion that Wu Ming bought for Artoria, Jean, and Maeve, Wu Ming walked out of Maeve's room with a pained expression and met the adult version of Artoria. Because of the restraints, Artoria has all the memories of the Middle East singularity, so sometimes Artoria can't help but transform into her adult form. That's why Wu Ming said that Artoria and Jean's breasts were sometimes different. However, Artoria's transformation from time to time brought double the joy to Wu Ming. Are you okay? Artoria's face was serious, but her tone was full of concern. I'm okay. However, Wu Ming's slightly pale face betrayed Wu Ming. You can't spoil Maeve all the time. Artoria began to educate Wu Ming. Although Artoria and Jean also had sex with Wu Ming, they were not the kind of people who would get addicted to it. They would only do it with Wu Ming when they were deeply in love, but they were usually like an old married couple. However, Maeve was different. Maeve was born with a perfect body like that of a goddess. It could be said that she was born with the ability to seduce men. And Maeve also acted according to the desire brought by this ability. Otherwise, Maeve's amorous behavior wouldn't be recorded in the historical stories. In addition, the Maeve that Wu Ming knew had always been pure. After having sex with Wu Ming, it was as if the desire that had been suppressed for a lifetime had been released. That was why she kept pestering Wu Ming. This time, it was quite impressive. Artoria didn't think that doing such things was evil, but there were limits. Just like last night, Maeve's screams were so loud that she and Jean couldn't sleep well. Fortunately, when they were brought to Wu Ming's side by the restraining force, their bodies were still at the level of heroic spirits. Otherwise, the dark circles under their eyes would be hanging on their faces. I know. I'll be careful in the future. It was impossible for Wu Ming not to be careful. If they did it every day, even Wu Ming wouldn't be able to take it. It was just like when the dust of a dead world entered the root. If the root's power couldn't supply it, the root would be burdened and forced to supply it. Over time, problems would arise. Knowing this, Wu Ming wouldn't let Maeve do as she pleased anymore. However, indulging like this from time to time was indeed very satisfying. Isn't Jean with you? Wu Ming asked Artoria about Jean. She went to buy some supplements for you, Artoria replied calmly. Although Wu Ming didn't need them, as expected, compared to Artoria and Maeve, Jean was more suitable to be a wife. After all, she was a village girl. By the way, when do you plan to bring Guinevere over? Artoria's question surprised Wu Ming. Then Wu Ming coughed and straightened his face. I still have to send Meiyu to school. Let's call it a day. I don't need any supplements. After that, Wu Ming ran away as if he was escaping. Artoria shook her head helplessly. She knew that Wuming was hiding something, but more than that, it was because Wuming found it hard to accept Artoria and Guinevere's identities. After all, the three of them were a twisted love triangle. Although it was pretentious, Artoria believed that Wuming would arrange everything in the end. Now he just needed some time. Chapter 1061. Artoria was right. Wuming really needed time right now. When he thought about how many things he had to deal with, Wuming would rather fight another 300 rounds with Gydia. But that was all talk. He couldn't run away from what he had to face. After sending Mei to school, Wuming and Kalas arrived at the root of everything. The golden portal closed and Wuming and Kalas, who had just exited the portal, were now standing on the platform of the root of everything. The original portal was purplish-black, but it was still too dark, so Wuming modified it in the root of everything. Not only did it change the color, but its ability was also greatly enhanced. Otherwise, Wuming wouldn't have been able to use the portal to directly travel from Meiyo's world to the root of everything. At the center of the platform where Kalas and Wuming stood, Wuming's backup machine had already disappeared. Without a doubt, the backup machine had gone to save the world. Wuming waved his hand, and several high-tech screens appeared in front of Wuming and Kalas. This was the result of Wuming using the authority of the root of everything. Wuming could directly see the scenes of other worlds, be it the past or the present. What was displayed on the screens was the live broadcast and recording of the backup machine saving the world. On the screens, various worlds were on the verge of destruction. In the next second, a giant white dragon descended from the sky, instantly found the source of the destruction, and stopped it. The survivors of those worlds were all deeply grateful to the giant white dragon. Although there were very few of them, there were still some who held resentment and hatred towards the white dragon for saving the world. Without a doubt, those people were not the masterminds behind the destruction of the world, but they probably had something to do with it. After that, the white dragon automatically retrieved information about that world, understood the cause, and used the root of everything to destroy those who were truly responsible for the destruction of the world and refused to change their ways. Even if they had abilities like substitutes or resurrections, they were useless in front of the root of everything. Wuming's backup machine tirelessly went to each world that was about to be destroyed one after another to save them. Looks like the backup machine can also take on my mission. However, there were worlds that had been saved, and there were also worlds that had not been saved. Wuming waved his hand again, and the screens in front of him changed instantly. The next thing that appeared on the screen was no longer a white dragon. Not only that, but the worlds on the screen were also on the verge of collapsing. A few seconds later, they completely shattered. Be it people or objects, they were all annihilated. As for the world itself, it would turn into an invisible speck of dust that wandered between worlds, eventually being sucked into the origin, and becoming a speck of origin black soil. That's not a good idea. Wuming frowned. It was clear that while the origin dragon could quickly save worlds, there were many worlds that could not wait for that world to arrive. After all, there was no telling how many times the origin had reincarnated, how big the world was, or how many worlds there were. Coupled with the fact that the world was being destroyed faster and faster, Wuming's backup machine alone would not be able to save them in time. In order for Wuming's plan to become God to proceed, he had to ensure that the world would not be destroyed again. Otherwise, they would be like a pool of water that was being filled with water at the same time. Wuming raised his hand and began to connect with the origin. An invisible thread connected to Wuming's body. Wuming wanted to temporarily stop the origin's abilities to create worlds, recycle dust, and produce origin power. Wuming wanted the origin to control the time of all worlds. Controlling a few dozen, or even a few hundred worlds could be done easily by borrowing the origin's power. However, if he wanted to control the time of all worlds that were about to be destroyed, the origin would need to stop everything else and fully focus on this aspect. By temporarily stopping or slowing down the flow of time of the worlds that were about to be destroyed, there would be enough time to save those worlds. However, there was no telling when Wuming's backup machine alone would be able to save all the worlds that were about to be destroyed. As for having Wu Ming save all the worlds that were about to be destroyed while their time was being controlled, that was even more impossible. After all, Wu Ming still had to accompany Meiyu, and there were a lot of things that he needed to take care of, so how could he save so many worlds that were about to be destroyed at once? And so Wu Ming made a decision. I need to find someone to help. As for who to find, it was naturally the people that Wu Ming was familiar with in the worlds that he had experienced. However, they all had their own lives, and not many of them would be able to fully devote themselves to saving a world. And so Wu Ming made another decision. He wanted to create a system. That's right, a system that gave the host a mission. He did as he said. And so, Wu Ming used the power of the prime origin to create the system. Because it was a drop in the ocean compared to the time needed to control all the worlds, creating this system did not burden the prime origin much. Similarly, it did not take much time and was quickly completed. Wu Ming held a ball of light that was emitting a faint white light in one hand with a satisfied look on his face. By the way, because it was a system, it did not have a fixed shape or size, and what Wu Ming was holding was the concept of a system. Wu Ming had set up a mission cycle in the system, which would issue missions at fixed times, and the missions were naturally to save the world. According to the difficulty and degree of destruction of each world, the missions would be categorized into different types, and those who fit the criteria would be given the corresponding missions. Because this system was connected to the prime origin, the prime origin would personally select the worlds and issue missions, so there was no need to worry about any issues. Normally, when a mission was issued, the default option would be accept the mission, but there were also options to postpone the mission, or reject the mission. After all, the real reason why Wu Ming had set up this system was to allow Wu Ming's acquaintances to save the world without affecting their own lives. Completing a mission would grant a required reward, and the reward could be selected by the host. For example, a reward that would increase one's personal strength, or a reward that would strengthen one's group. And these rewards would be directly replicated by the prime origin from each world where such rewards existed, so there was no need to worry about affecting other worlds. Moreover, because it was for acquaintances, there would be no failure penalty even if the reject the mission was chosen, and the rejected mission would not be delayed but transferred to someone else. However, if the postpone the mission option was chosen, the reward would definitely be reduced. Postpone the mission meant that the host would temporarily accept the mission and not do it immediately. And if the host did not accept the mission but did not do it immediately, the reward would naturally be reduced. Of course, if there was enough time, the host could also request the system to accept more missions. In any case, this was a rather good system from all aspects. Master, do you want to give it a name? Kalas suggested. A name? After thinking for a second or two, Wu Ming gave an answer. Just call it system. Chapter 1062. Kalas didn't say anything about this. After all, she already knew that her master was terrible at naming things. She was just looking forward to it. Now let the great origin send this system to a designated existence. Then with that existence as the unit, it can be spread to the surroundings. The system was a concept. Therefore, Wu Ming would split it into several parts and send it to a certain existence in the world that Wu Ming had experienced. Then, that existence would spread it to other people designated by Wu Ming. Wu Ming lightly tossed the system in his hand, and the ball of light instantly disappeared. The system had been sent by the great origin to a designated person in the world designated by Wu Ming. In Meiyu's world, Artoria, Jean, and Maeve all received the system. Immediately, the three of them gathered together. My dear needs me. Of course, I'll help him. Maeve smiled sweetly. She didn't want to be treated like a vase by Wu Ming. Fortunately, Wu Ming didn't do that. He still chose to let her help. This isn't just helping Wu Ming. It's also saving other worlds. Artoria was King Arthur after all. She had a strong sense of justice. I'll help as much as I can. Although Jean didn't have much confidence, when it came to saving other worlds, she would definitely not hesitate, just like Artoria. After all, this was indeed helping Wu Ming. Although Enkidu also received the system, her main task was to look after Tiamat. As for Mayu, Ilya, and the others, although they weren't weak, Wuming didn't give them the system. Elementary school students should just obediently go to school. Great Underground Tomb of Nazalik. In the office, the guardian supervisor Wyrm sat on the high-class sofa that belonged to Wuming's office. He had a serious expression as he went through documents. That is, if you ignore the fact that Wyrm was constantly moving against the sofa. If Demiyugos were here, he would definitely ask Wyrm what he was doing. Then, Wyrm would reply with an infatuated look on his face that he was trying to taint Wuming's aura. Right at this moment, Wyrm froze as if he had just received something. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door, and Demiyugos walked in. Seeing the stunned Wyrm, Demiyugos was puzzled. Demiyugos walked to the desk and put down the document in his hand. What's wrong, Wyrm? Wyrm, who had regained his senses after hearing Demiyugos' words, had a serious expression on his face. Sir Wuming sent a message. When it came to Wuming, Demiyugos became serious. Demiyugos, Lord Wuming is going to become a god in another world. I see. So that's why Lord Wuming left this world. Then, we will naturally get what Lord Wuming wants. Both Wyrm and Demiyugos had a joyful expression. As expected of the Supreme Honorable, even his goal was so great. The two began to imagine. According to the Supreme Honorable's decree, we need to implant the system that Lord Wuming passed to me and to everyone in the great underground tomb of Nazalik to help Lord Wuming save the worlds that are about to be destroyed. After all, if those worlds are destroyed, Lord Wuming's goal will not be achieved. Hearing this, Demiyugos pushed up his glasses. Indeed, and we can even win people's hearts through rescue. As expected of Lord Wuming. Neither of them cared about why other worlds were involved. After all, they had come to another world in the great underground tomb of Nazalik. There was nothing wrong with Wuming going to another world. Then, Wyrm stretched out her hand, and a ball of light appeared in her hand. You can implant this system through contact. Lord Wuming has already put the specific method of use in the system. Arrange it as soon as possible. As she spoke, Wyrm touched Demiyugos with the ball of light. In the next second, Demiyugos had a thought, and the same ball of light appeared in his hand. So that's how it is. As expected of Lord Wuming, to be able to create such a powerful tool. Then Demiyugos bowed slightly. Then I'll take my leave. I'll get everyone in the great underground tomb of Nazalik to implant it as soon as possible. Demiyugos left the room, leaving Wyrm alone in the room with a look of excitement. Lord Wuming, I will definitely make you a god in another world. The same thing happened in another world. In the world of the god slayers Athena, Lancelot, and Guinevere, who were living on a small island in the Pacific Ocean, received the system at the same time. My lord, Lancelot, who was dressed like an older sister, looked very excited. It's Lord Villo. Guinevere, who looked like a young girl, was even more excited. Interesting. Athena, on the other hand, seemed to be very interested in this system. My lord needs us. Lancelot immediately dressed up, as if he was about to go save the world. Wait, uncle, don't be in such a hurry, Guinevere quickly said. Lancelot was confused. With just the three of us, I'm afraid we can't help much. This system has a spreading function, and there's also a list of people who can be trusted. Why don't we leave one person to spread the word? Athena instantly understood Guinevere's meaning. That's right, I think so too. This way, we can help Lord Villo more efficiently. If that's the case, let my beloved daughter stay. With my lord's deterrence, even without me, no one would dare to attack you, Lancelot suggested. That's right. Even if you become his subordinate god, you won't have much combat power. At most, you can protect yourself. If that's the case, you should stay. Then Lancelot and Athena instantly disappeared. They accepted the system's mission and went to save the other worlds. Guinevere, who was left alone, was in a state of sorrow. Why did this happen? I wanted to see if I could see Lord Villo. In the game world, in the human kingdom of Elgia, the residence of the queen, Rick, who had installed a mechanical arm on the broken arm, hurriedly ran in from outside. Rick had matured a lot, but he was not as haggard as before. Chloe, I have news of Lord Villo. Rick's sister, Chloe, who was not dressed very elegantly, walked out in surprise. Compared to the cheerful and lively Chloe before, Chloe was now more dignified. However, Chloe did not change when it came to her brother. The god who disguised himself as a human to help you? Didn't you say he went to the other worlds? After Wuming left, Rick did not hide it and told his sister about Wuming's identity, who was the current queen of the human kingdom. After Teto became the only god, Chloe, with the support of Rick and many other humans, established the human kingdom of Elgia and became the queen. Teto repaired the World Cup, so the living conditions of the humans were not bad. More and more humans from small tribes joined Elgia, and Elgia became more and more prosperous. Let's not talk so much. Take a look at this first. Rick instantly held Chloe's hand. Chloe was stunned as if she was electrocuted. This system is very suitable for the development of us humans. After understanding the system that had been transferred from Rick to Crony expressed her thoughts. I think so too, but I'm still considering whether to give this to other races. Although the world was at peace, the conflicts between the various races could not be resolved so easily. The races that needed to cooperate were willing to put aside their hatred, but the forest elves and goblins were still enemies, not to mention the other races. Let's do it secretly in our country first. Our only god is Teto after all. If we spread the outer gods things, I'm afraid the only god will be unhappy. Chloe, who had been the queen for a while, immediately made a decision. Of course, the system has stated that we can spread it directly to the Jikai race. I'll leave this task to you, Rick. Remember to explain it to Zio properly. I know I'll contact the Jikai race. Rick looked helpless. Then Chloe showed a pained expression. As the ambassador, you're the only one who has good contact with the Jikai race. However, the Jikai race did have some problems with their brains recently, so you should be careful. Although Rick had given up the throne to his sister, he had become a diplomat of the kingdom. Rick had always been working hard for the country. Moreover, Rick's mechanical arm was obtained through diplomatic contact with the Jikai race. Due to Zio, the Jikai race was gradually awakening their individual emotions, but machines were still machines, and no one could guarantee when they would have problems. The Jikai race has already unilaterally submitted to the Villo, just like the Skywing race. I believe that if it's something from the Villo, they would definitely accept it. Rick looked confident. If that's the case, let's contact the Skywing race at the same time. A child's voice rang out in the hall where only Chloe and Rick were present. The only god. Teto. When did you get here? Both Chloe and Rick instantly knew who the owner of the voice was. It was the god of games, Tut. As for why Rick acted like he was familiar with Teto and even dared to be so impudent, it was because Teto would come looking for Rick to play that unfinished game of chess, and the game was still ongoing. Moreover, Teto was born from Rick's thoughts, and the two of them could be considered close friends, which was why Rick was so casual. I'm a Villo after all, so I'll allow him to interfere with this world as much as possible. Just do it. If Wuming hadn't given the Celestial Cup to Teto, Teto wouldn't have become the only god. In a sense, Wuming could be considered the father of this world's only god. After Teto's voice disappeared, Chloe and Rick looked at each other and nodded. They then split up and began to spread the system. Above the clouds of the kingdom of Elgia, Teto was holding a white ball of light with a smile on his face. The system only gave it to the humans. Looks like you want the Skywing and Jikai races to ally with the humans. As expected of you. In the next second, Teto, who had loaded the system, disappeared. Such a fun game system naturally had to be tried out by him, the only god. Chapter 1063. Let's go back, Matthew. Gudatsi looked particularly worried. It's okay, senpai. My body was originally used for experiments. I'm already very satisfied to be able to live until now, meet senpai, and experience so much. Before Matthew finished speaking, he fell into a coma. Matthew. Gudatsi didn't know where she got the strength from, but she directly carried Matthew and ran back to Chaldea. The next second after Gudatsi and Matthew's figures disappeared, A golden ripple appeared, and Wuming walked out of the portal. Looking at the two people in the distance, Wuming was quite glad. He was glad that he came in person this time. Casey Parrock, Wuming whispered softly, and a snow-white squirrel-like animal came out of the snow. It was Fufu. In fact, during this period, Fufu had been following Matthew, but Matthew couldn't find it most of the time. Just like this time, Fufu was hiding in the snow. By the way, Fufu was not as afraid of Wuming as before this time. Instead, it walked to Wuming and sat down. "You want to save Matthew, right?" Wuming said. Fufu didn't speak, nor did it shout. It just nodded gently. "Then do it. You've been in Chaldea for so long. It's time to repay Matthew's kindness." Fufu was quite puzzled. Could it be that Wuming called it out just to say this? "I originally wanted to adjust Matthew's body myself, but I accidentally found you. I don't like people who don't repay kindness, so I'm going to use your ability as a beast to adjust Matthew's body." It turned out that Fufu wanted to use the energy accumulated during the time in Chaldea. Fufu agreed. Wuming waved his hand and a golden teleportation gate opened up. A mass of golden essence flew out from it. The essence instantly fused into Fufu's body. In the next second, Fufu's body began to change. Fo's head, body, and limbs swelled up as if they had grown tumors. However, as if he didn't want to turn into a beast, Fufu forcibly suppressed it. The tumor-like swelling all came to Fufu's tail. In the end, Fufu's body did not change at all. Only his tail became incomparably huge, like a burning seven-colored flame, filling the sky. Fufu glanced at Wuming, then turned around abruptly and charged towards Chaldea. Watching Fufu enter Chaldea, Wuming did not move, because he was waiting for someone. However, Wuming knew that that person would not come for a while, so he chose to walk around and enjoy the snowy scenery. Wuming did not give the system to anyone in Chaldea. After all, other than the heroic spirits, only Olga Marie, who was about to master the third law, was powerful. Matthew, Gadotsi, Roman, and the less than 20 Chaldea employees who survived did not have much combat power. Moreover, they did not need to become powerful, especially Gadotsi, Matthew, and Roman. They did not desire to become powerful. They were satisfied with being ordinary people. Wuming walked while daydreaming. About half an hour later, a man in a white coat came from Chaldea. It was Roman Ackerman. As soon as they met, Wuming asked about Matthew. "How is Matthew? Is his body okay now?" The reason why Roman came out late was naturally to check on Matthew's physical condition after being transformed by Fufu's power. Matthew's injuries are completely healed, and his cells are no longer dying. He can be said to be the same as a normal person, and his physical fitness is far better than that of an ordinary person. Roman's face was filled with joy from the bottom of his heart, and at the same time he was relieved. After Roman asked Wuming to bypass Gydia, he gave the 10th ring of King Solomon to Wuming. As a price, Roman completely bid farewell to his identity as King Solomon. However, after that, Matthew's body began to deteriorate, which made Roman blame himself. If he still had the ring, he would have used all of King Solomon's power to save Matthew. After all, his identity had been exposed. The remaining less than 20 people in Chaldea knew Roman's true identity, so Roman did not need to hide it. However, Roman gave the 10th ring to Wuming. But now, the fourth beast, who had been hiding in Chaldea, had transformed Matthew's body at the cost of sacrificing his intelligence. Matthew would no longer be affected by the aftereffects of human experimentation. Moreover, they had defeated the fourth beast in disguise. This was a good thing for all mankind. "It seems that you really like being a human, Solomon," Wuming said, turning to look at the snow. "Just call me Roman. Indeed, I like being an ordinary person. If it weren't for the sake of humanity, I wouldn't have become a doctor and entered Chaldea." Roman and Wuming stood side by side, looking into the distance. "Congratulations, your wish has been completely fulfilled," Wuming said half-jokingly. After all, Roman had completely lost the ability of King Solomon, and he was already an ordinary person. "If it's possible, I really want to quit my job in Chaldea and be a real ordinary person. I want to enjoy my life, work my life, be happy my life, and worry my life." But he could not. Chaldea was now waiting to be done. Even if it was purely for Matthew, Roman had to stay. In order to prevent human experimentation like Matthew from appearing in Chaldea again, Roman had to stay and supervise Chaldea. I'm going to let Gydia work for me. Wuming stated his intention. Work. Roman was stunned. It has destroyed many worlds. After those worlds have been reconstructed by me, I'm going to let it protect those worlds. I see. Even Roman found it slightly difficult to accept the topic of destroying and reconstructing worlds. Also, I'm going to let Gydia inherit your power and save those worlds that are about to perish for me first. Wuming was going to let Gydia implant the system to save the world. However, the system given to Gydia was dedicated to monitoring Gydia. There would be no reward, and there would be no rejection of missions. Everything was mandatory. This was the proverb. You can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment. Although Gydia was spared, punishment was inevitable. Let it go. I believe that it will be willing to do so now. After experiencing the threat of death, Roman thought that Gydia would reflect on it. After all, it was a tactic created by Roman. Roman did not think that Gydia would be pulled down. That's it then. I'll go first. After all, Wuming still had a lot of things to do. Don't you want to see the director? Roman suddenly said. Wuming stopped, turned around and glanced at Roman. She has Parmelia with her. I don't need to. I'll come and see her when she has fully mastered the third method. Opening the golden ripple, Wuming did not stop and walked straight in. After the portal closed, Roman raised his arm. He had a communication device like Gadatsi's on his arm. Director, he's gone. Chapter 1064. Wuming returned to the route, and Collis was waiting for Wuming on the central platform of the route. As long as Wuming left, Collis would replace Wuming as the temporary administrator. Master, I've confirmed all the people you've been paying special attention to. They've all been implanted with systems, so you don't have to worry about letting them meet for now. Wuming felt a bit awkward at Collis's honest words. Wuming coughed to hide his awkwardness. Ahem, let's begin the next part of the plan. The next part of the plan was Wuming's plan to become a god. He had to restrict the highly developed worlds and control them as a god, so that they wouldn't self-destruct because they wanted to explore higher levels of development. My contract, my dependence. I am the place where the tributaries converge. Bind with me, heed my call, obey my command, appear. As Wuming chanted the words of the spirit, nothing happened. Or rather, nothing happened to the root. Meanwhile, in each of the highly developed worlds, a silhouette appeared. It was a silent silhouette. Now Wuming's essence and abilities had transcended from before, reaching an unprecedented and indescribable height. The price was that Wuming's eyes couldn't be changed back to their original color, and could only maintain their golden color and fiery red pupils. The 12 clones had completely broken free from the shackles of the spirit, and could activate their abilities with just a thought. Chanting the spirit was just a habit of Wuming's. Not only that, but all of Wuming's abilities had been strengthened like never before. The dependence of the 12 clones could create countless clones with strength comparable to the main body. Wuming wanted to use these clones to enter the highly developed worlds selected by the root to restrict these worlds and prevent them from dying. Wuming's original plan was to wait until all the worlds that were about to be destroyed were saved before activating it. However, in the end, Wuming still chose to work on both fronts, restricting highly developed worlds from heading towards destruction, saving worlds that were about to be destroyed from destruction, stopping all functions of the root, and focusing all efforts on controlling time in all worlds. That way, the world would no longer be destroyed, and the world dust would not enter the root and become the root's black soil. Wuming's series of actions would no longer lead to the destruction of worlds. As long as he restricted the highly developed worlds and saved the worlds that were about to be destroyed, everything would return to the right track. The Great Origin would no longer accelerate its reincarnation due to its burdens, and the world would no longer be destroyed. The death of a world would only be a natural death because it had reached its end. In short, all that was left now was only a matter of time. After some calculations, Master only needs to send Mayu, Sama to school for another 3 months, and everything will be realized. With Kalas's words, Wuming was relieved. Everything is finally settled. Wuming lay down on the root's platform and rested, thinking back to the time when the old man who took him in had passed away, when he obtained his own scale and headed to a mysterious world to begin this memorable journey. Wuming was filled with endless emotions. Wuming got to know quite a few people and came into contact with quite a few things along the way. But in the end, he still managed to return home and eliminate the trouble brought by the origin black soil, as well as alter the origin and prevent the destruction of a large number of worlds. This is much more interesting than before. The before, Wuming was referring to the root dragon before this reincarnation. Back then, the root dragon was like a machine that constantly carried out its mission to protect the world. Although it had visited many worlds and seen many things, it was still rather boring. After Wuming received these memories from the root, he immediately used some means to extract them and seal them away. The reason could be summed up in one word: boring. Moreover, Wuming felt that it was enough to have the memories of when he was Wuming. If he received those memories, Wuming might not be himself anymore. Or rather, it was very likely that it would revert back to being the tireless, brainless, and machine-like origin dragon that only knew how to save the world. At that thought, Wuming felt that it was great that he could become Wuming from the root dragon. At that moment, Kala suddenly spoke, interrupting Wuming's thoughts. Master, according to the memo, you have yet to resolve the issue of Irbiruai, the Platinum Dragon King, and the nameless spellbook. At Kalas's words, Wuming abruptly jumped up from the platform. I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. Wuming swiped his hand across the void, and a virtual screen appeared. This was the current world of the underground tomb. Irbiruai was a vampire, after all, and Wuming was using the root to search for the earliest timeline of Irbiruai's era. Wuming decided to resolve Irbiruai's issue first. So it's 200 years ago. Wuming found it. Just adjust the timeline to 300 years ago. I'll go ahead and see what's going on. She had traveled through the timeline before Irbiruai was born, and then hid in the dark. Wuming could not find the reason for his distrust. However, Wuming's mind suddenly lit up. He paused for a moment as if he understood something. Could it be that I actually went to that era and came into contact with that dragon while hiding in the dark? As for what Irbiruai said about Wuming being her benefactor, perhaps Wuming had gone to that world and accidentally exposed his past to Irbiruai. It seemed that he had to find another way. If that's the case, I won't go, right? I don't believe that it's because of me if I don't go. However, in the next second after Wuming said that, several figures somehow appeared on the platform of the root. Maeve, Tiamat, Athena, the young version of Guinevere, the young version of Guinevere, Lancelot, Pest, Letitia, and Shobi. These young girls of all shapes and sizes. At first, they did not know what to do. However, they quickly reacted. Because Wuming was here. However, while they reacted, Wuming did not. Darling. Maeve jumped into Wuming's arms. Child. Child. Tiamat hugged Wuming from behind. Lord Villo. The young version of Guinevere and the young version of Guinevere hugged Wuming from both sides. Athena stood aside and watched the show. She stopped Lancelot, who wanted to help the monarch. Letitia comforted Pest, who did not get the chance. Shobi, on the other hand, was more easily satisfied. She only needed to see Wuming, the person who changed her and made her develop feelings for him, and that was enough. Kalas. What's going on? Wuming was extremely flustered. Master, they are all existences with systems implanted in them. After they completed a mission to save the world, the reward they chose was to meet you. Therefore, the root in charge of giving out rewards directly gave them the rewards they wanted. By the way, Master, Lady Irbiruai and Lady Mayu have also come into contact with systems for some reason. Wuming could not help but look at Maeve. He felt that it was Maeve's doing. Maeve, on the other hand, chuckled and admitted it. Also, your female guards in the God-Slayer world have also been implanted with systems. Kalas emphasized the word female. Wuming looked at the young version of Guinevere. The young version of Guinevere chuckled and admitted it. The young version of Guinevere is the reward that Artoria chose. Wu Ming's eyes started to lose focus. At that moment, Enkidu broke through space and walked out. I'm sorry, Lord Wu Ming. I accidentally let Mother come into contact with systems. Now, looking at the large number of young girls surrounding Wu Ming, Enkidu could not continue. As the saying goes, raising a cow is the same as raising 2 cows. It seems that one more Tiamat would not be a problem. Collis, let's go. With a whoosh, Wu Ming disappeared. He went to 300 years ago, the era before Ibirui was born. Wu Ming now knew why he left his mark in that world hundreds of years ago. It was because it was unavoidable. What was worth celebrating was that the world crisis had basically been resolved, and Wu Ming's ultimate goal had been achieved. However, after Wu Ming returned from that world, he had to face how he provoked these young girls. They lived in peace. This was comparable to the destruction of the world. This might be the end of one thing, the beginning of another. End. Chapter 1065. In the Hakata world, because of Wu Ming's achievement in defeating absolute evil, No Name was given the title of regional ruler by White Yiksha. Coupled with the recapture of the flag, the community was able to develop rapidly, but No Name still didn't have a name. Because it was taken away by the Demon King, if they wanted to get back the title, they had to obtain the contract to obtain the name of No Name. But this was extremely difficult. If it wasn't for someone intentionally releasing Az Dakaha, who knew when they would be able to find the flag of No Name. And there were also the members of No Name that were taken away by the Demon King. They had to all be found, which wasn't an easy task. But if it was according to 16 Knights' words, that would be. This is interesting, isn't it? In the No Name conference room, Ren, who had just finished analyzing the current flaws of No Name, looked at the excited 16 Knights who stood up and sighed helplessly, but didn't say anything. What's interesting about it? 16 Knights. San's brain is always wired differently from others. Black Rabbit couldn't help but complain. But Jiu Yuao stood on 16 Knights' side. 16 Knights is right. This is more challenging for this lady. Haruai Hiroyuki, who was holding the 3-furred cat, also nodded. Interesting. What's interesting about it? Miss Hiroyuki and Miss Hiroyuki are obviously just playing around. Black Rabbit was so angry that his ears jumped. Don't say that, Black Rabbit. 16 Knights smiled wantonly and looked at Black Rabbit. Villo, that guy defeated absolute evil in the final trial by himself. How can this uncle be left behind? We're not delicate flowers that need to hide behind him. If this kind of thing is always left to the Villo, wouldn't we lose face? Jiu Yuao added. So we have to finish what even the Villo couldn't. Haruai Hiroyuki's eyes became determined. Letitia, who was sitting on the side, couldn't help but smile. She could see that these 3 problem children did want to be in the limelight, but more importantly, they also wanted to take on the responsibility of the community, and didn't want to let Wu Ming bear everything alone. However, they were still not strong enough. After all, the reason why Wu Ming didn't seek help from No Name when Az Dakaha was released was because they were too weak. When Wu Ming had faced Az Dakaha, who had the origin black soil, he didn't even dare to say that he had a 100% chance of winning. So how could he involve others? Otherwise, Wu Ming wouldn't have used himself as bait to entangle Az Dakaha and prevent him from wreaking havoc. Otherwise, with Az Dakaha's strength at that time, the lower levels of the box court would have been wiped out, and it would be hard to say if all the members of No Name would have survived. Then you'll have to hurry up and become stronger. Letitia smiled. At this moment, a light spot appeared above the conference room table. The light spot suddenly split into several parts and merged into everyone's body at a speed that no one could react to. 16 Knights closed her eyes and sensed the information from the light that entered her body. A few seconds later, she suddenly opened her eyes. I was still left behind by that guy. However, 16 Knights wasn't dispirited because of this. Instead, her smile was exceptionally bright. However, this is also a way to become stronger. Watch me use this Villos thing to catch up to him. When the time comes, he'll cry. The thing that just entered the bodies of No Name was the system that Wu Ming created. And you can also become a savior. Yuasuke's eyes were shining as if she was very interested in saving the world. There are also rewards that can be obtained. Haruhi Hiroyuki pointed out the main point. This was also the way to become stronger, that 16 knights had mentioned. And you can also choose a group reward. That's great, young master Run. This way, our community can develop even faster. How did Mr. Villo create such a powerful gift? Black Rabbit's face was filled with joy. This reward is really. Now even finding the former members of the community and our no name, as previous names will be more convenient. Mr. Villo has really helped us a lot. Ren's face also showed an uncontrollable smile. As expected of my master. Letitia seemed to be used to her master being able to do surprising things. However, Letitia noticed that Pest, who didn't have much right to speak and didn't speak much, was now frozen in place as if he was possessed. What's wrong, Pest? Letitia curiously walked to Pest's side. Ah, I'm fine. Pest was shocked and immediately turned his back on Letitia. However, Pest didn't look like he was fine no matter how she looked at him. I'll go out first. Pest finished speaking and ran out without looking back. After that, Letitia found a few drops of tears on Pest's seat. Pest, who ran out, couldn't stop his tears from flowing. This was because in the system that Wuming gave her, there was a message from Wuming. I've already investigated. The sun entering the Little Ice Age caused the Black Death to break out. It was actually to suppress a human's final trial. As long as your strength is enough, I will definitely help you solve the human's final trial. This way, White Yaksha will have no reason to let the sun enter the Little Ice Age. And the history of the Black Death will also be changed. Moreover, this is the box court, so you don't have to worry about disappearing. Maybe at that time, I won't even have to do anything. You and your no-name companions can kill that human's final trial. So whether it's summoning Wes and Latine or changing the birth of the Black Death, I want you to do it yourself. Through this gift that I'm giving you, work hard to become stronger, my little maid. Recalling these words, Pest's tears began to fall faster and faster, and so did his footsteps. Finally, after reaching his room, Pest couldn't hold it in anymore and burst into tears. Wah! Letitia, who was standing outside Pest's door with her back against the wall, smiled faintly and said the same words as before. As expected of you, my master. The X-Moon world was located inside Chaldea, which was located on an iceberg in the center of the South Pole. Because of Wuming and Zelik, Chaldea managed to survive. The dozens of masters who were kept in the freezer also woke up and were sent to the hospital for treatment. Now everyone knew that Chaldea wasn't to be trifled with. Only a few rascals dared to target Chaldea. However, even Olga Marie's Animusphia family would be able to take care of these rascals. After Olga Marie completely learned the third spell, Chaldea might become another great influence in the magician world. It also seemed to reflect Chaldea's beautiful future. During this time, the sky in Chaldea often cleared up, but this wasn't a bad thing. Gudatsi and Matthew would come out for a walk from time to time. Although it was a little cold, this piece couldn't be exchanged. Today the two were still walking outside. By the way, Matthew, do you know that Chaldea is in the South Pole? Gudatsi suddenly asked. Matthew's little head couldn't help but tilt. The South Pole? No, senior, I'm not very sure. After all, I haven't been out much. After all, Matthew was the product of Chaldea's human experiments. Naturally, he didn't know. Is that so? Gudatsi probably also thought of this, and felt a little lonely. Today, I learned from the doctor that Chaldea is on an iceberg in the center of the South Pole. I thought it was on the Himalayas, hee. After all, it was the highest mountain in the world. Normal people would generally think so. Even if they didn't think so, they wouldn't have thought that Chaldea was on the snow mountain in the South Pole. I didn't think about this problem. Matthew looked up at the sky and said quietly, Actually, I'm satisfied as long as I can see the blue sky. Looking at Matthew like this, Gudatsi felt particularly distressed. At this time Matthew suddenly coughed. Cough cough, Matthew. Gudatsi immediately supported Matthew, who almost fell. A trace of blood emerged from Matthew's palm that was covering his mouth. Matthew's body had reached its limit. As a test subject of the heroic spirit possession experiment, it was a miracle that Matthew could live until now, and accompanied Gadotsi through 7 singularities. Even with the existence of Galahad's spiritual base, Matthew's body was full of holes. In other words, Matthew didn't have long to live. You're tuning into the Lee May Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.